This is part of our holiday webinar series. I think this is our fifth one or so, fourth or fifth one. And the focus today, we've covered a lot of internal things so far, including our difficult and challenging topic on tax that we had a few weeks ago, which is always something of a challenge for folks to try to figure out in this evolving world of e-commerce. So if you haven't seen all of our webinars, you can, we'll send out the link so that you can go to the landing page that has all of the sessions already recorded, and you can watch those and share those with colleagues and so on. So last week we talked about brand building and all the things you need to do to build your brand and things that you can use to dial up your marketing efforts from a brand standpoint. Today, we invited Hawk Media to join us to talk about how you use social media, in particular as part of your paid strategy as well, to ultimately acquire customers. So last week was all about branding. Today is how do we drive that revenue? And so we're, like I said, fortunate to have Alex with us today, who's going to talk about this. Alex is a director over at Hawk Media. I'm going to turn things over to him here now and let him introduce himself and tell you a little bit about Hawk Media, how we're working with them and how they're helping partners, and talk a little bit about social media. So Alex, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Kai. I'm the Director of Paid Social and Special Projects at Hawk Media, which is a month-to-month a la carte digital marketing consultancy targeted towards, obviously, entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized businesses. Background on me, I've been in the digital marketing space for about 10 years, working at Hawk for the past 2 and some change. My role here is predominantly to not only manage the the paid social team here at Hawk, but also to develop the relationship strategically between Facebook and Hawk as an agency. We get a lot of benefits from our partnership, and from that partnership, where I'm able to explore and leverage a lot of resources that I think might be out of the reach of a lot of folks. And so I'm hoping to convey that all to you today. Cool. So let me just share my screen real quick here. Visual thumbs up on if you can see it. Outstanding. All right, so let's get started. Introductions have been made. Let's go to media. All right, getting into the actual content of media buying landscape for October and beyond. One of the things that's really going to be something I want to talk about today is a little bit of strategy, a little bit of tactics in terms of what you need to be cognizant of going into the Q4 season to make sure that you're not only setting yourself up for success, but you're also taking the steps that are going to be most suited to your business in order to succeed in this really competitive time. So one of the things that needs to be noted, like before we talk about anything else, is the media landscape as we go into October, November, and December, because one, no one here has done a global pandemic before, I don't think. And two, it's election year on top of that. In particular, it's a very particular election year because of how 2016 sort of went with the presence of social media and everything else. The social media footprint for 2020 is absolutely unimaginably large. They are buying up so much inventory to reach those potential voters in those potential swing states. So it's going to be, we're going to see a rapid increase in the cost of an impression as we go into late October, early November. And the reason for that, from an e-com perspective, is like worthy to understand, is that an expensive impression means an expensive conversion. As your cost per 1,000 impressions goes up, your cost per sale also goes up. There's just no two ways around it, unless you have a really cool magic lever that you're able to pull and make free conversions happen, in which case I would like to join your webinar.
Hey, Alex, yeah. quick interruption. Sorry. Can you put the slides into full presentation mode? I think some folks are saying that it's a little hard to see them. They're not like full screen, so they're coming across a little small. Or if there's
is that much better? Chat here.
I think so. Let's see. Let's assume so for now.
All right.
Thanks, Alex. Sorry.
If not,
it looks like a few people say if there's any way you can make it a little bit bigger, but
That would, nope, it does not work.
Okay.
Wait. Nope, that's about as big as it gets.
Okay, well, we'll have to make do. So, all right, sorry to interrupt, Alex.
It's all good. So everyone's eyes are on social. Costly impressions are going to be costly conversions. So we need to be cognizant of that as we go into early November and make the appropriate strategic pivots. And I'll speak a little bit on that later, but it's just something that I want to bring up from the top. On top of that, Halloween's going to be a little bit different this year. Obviously, with social distancing rules in play, there's going to be less like typical social gatherings, less events with friends, and it's going to be more focused on sort of like paid experiences. So like, as an example, I know that there's a number of drive-through Halloween experiences that are being marketed in the Los Angeles area right now that typically wouldn't have had much of a social footprint as they do now, simply because, there's a desire to act on like the seasonality of, the end of October. At the same time, the options that we typically have available are not necessarily going to be the ones that we have available to us right now. So that's going to increase overall costs for that period as well. 11/11. So one of the things I'll speak about a little bit later is that a lot of small and medium-sized businesses in Q4 have started moving their sales and promotions earlier in the month to avoid the competition of Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And the reason for that is like, it's very difficult to contend with the raw purchasing power of like a Coke or a Procter and Gamble. So, it requires a different sort of approach to getting the same sort of promotion and like revenue generated for your business through channels that are less competitive, because it's going to be much more difficult to efficiently convert people during that time. Again, more expensive impressions, more expensive conversions. And if, Coke is buying up 75 million impressions, that's going to make every other impression a little bit more expensive because everyone's bidding on it. So 11/11 is sort of like a pre-Black Friday, Cyber Monday shopping holiday that I have been, communicated. It's been communicated to me a couple different times. Something worth considering, but also going to be another bump in overall purchasing behavior on media platforms during that time. Then there's the big event, Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Again, I've mentioned this a couple times, but expensive impressions, expensive conversions, and we're competing with some really, really big companies at that time. So it's really worth considering is Black Friday, Cyber Monday in particular going to be the juice worth the squeeze, or should I move up or later a little bit in the Q4 season in order to capitalize on less competitive, ad marketplace? Or do I think that, the increased buying behavior of that period is going to compensate for that effectively? It's going to be a case-by-case basis, obviously unique to your position in the market, your, audience, everything else. So there's no like blanket recommendation I can make, but something to consider. And then there's last shipping day, which is particularly for e-com. There's going to be a cutoff date as to when you can get products out the door to get there by Christmas, New Year's, any sort of like meaningful like social event. And really after that threshold, people usually I've seen turn off, their most like highest converting, like most expensive campaigns to go into more of like a low level, like branding awareness, like just keeping it top of mind. Just because if someone buys something on, December 24th, they're not going to get it by Christmas. So that's usually when people buy stuff. Cool. Moving right along. So this is a conversion trends chart from Facebook IQ, which is a really great resource if you're buying on social media. It's free, absolutely. Just go search for Facebook IQ. It should be very near the top. It has trends relating to various verticals, various industries, various periods of time, various countries, and you can sort of like mix and match and get the insights that you're looking to get. But one of the things that we've got here is this is the 2019 Q4 and Q1 in 2020 conversion trends, and this conversion spent, meaning that this is what was spent for conversions campaigns, which is your purchase, your view content, your add to cart, or your DPA catalog sales. Those sort of campaigns over the last bit of the year, and you can anticipate costs of impressions to move nearly on a one-to-one basis with this chart. Obviously, it's going to look much more different for an election year with the pandemic and everything else, but that just really shows you the impact of like how much more expensive Black Friday and Cyber Monday is going to be than even like 2 weeks before. So really worth considering and understanding that. Any questions so far? I actually can't see.
Hey, Alex, I'll just ask you a quick question just while you're going. You know, you kind of talked about cutoff dates and shipping and so on. Like, I know people have been talking about that, right, and so on. But like, how serious do you think it is? Is it still just like, oh well, you know, like it'll actually all work out, or are e-commerce businesses genuinely scared of like cutoff dates and shipping issues and challenges? Like, how what level of severity you know do you put that
Uh, a DEFCON 5 kind of thing. So what I mean by that is, it's very serious, and it's very serious for a very particular reason. I'll get into this a little bit later in this presentation, but Facebook takes customer feedback deadly serious. And it is significant enough and meaningful enough that it can actually disable an ad account if there's too much negative feedback associated with that. If someone orders something and says, you know, I need to get this by Christmas, I'm going to order at midnight on December 24th. I didn't get it by Christmas. I'm mad now. And if they file that negative feedback through Facebook against your store, your page, that is a significant ding to your ability to competitively serve ads, to get low-cost impressions that are still high quality. There's just a lot of dangers associated with you know, putting yourself in a position where you're going to be selling something and not effectively communicating that it won't be there for X amount of days. And you know, you can say all that till you're blue in the face. People don't like to read. So it's very serious, and I would make sure that everyone understands the fact that you need to operate within those timetables.
Got it. Thanks.
Cool. So obviously there's a global pandemic afoot, and that's going to create a bunch of interesting conditions with regards to e-com that haven't necessarily existed before. So overall, like, shopping in real life is no longer a thing. You know, there's people who still do go into those retail spaces, but for the most part, overall shopping behavior in those environments has decreased significantly due to, you know, the pandemic. So that's not going to stop people from shopping, though, because people enjoy shopping. People have things that they need to buy, like problems they need to solve. So how are they going to route that desire and that need through the filter of, you know, going outside, going into these public spaces may be dangerous, and that is through e-commerce. Even without the signals from, you know, COVID-19, we were seeing an uptick in overall like e-commerce shopping behavior as these tools become more and more frictionless, as Instagram and Facebook shopping become more implemented and like calcified in sort of like the overall consciousness of the prospect. So we were going to see a really robust month regardless of the pandemic, and the pandemic is making that like amplified by a factor of 2 or 3. It's really significant impact. And that means that we as marketers need to understand that everything needs to be buttoned up, frictionless, accessible, so that we are enabling people to go through those e-commerce experiences without any sort of hitches or issues to be able to purchase products. You know, I've worked in the small and medium-sized business vertical for a couple of years now, and I've seen more times than I can count a huge issue of, you know, facing my clients is that the site experience itself is non-conducive to shopping. It's not conducive to a mobile experience, and that's actually causing significant fall-offs in conversion behavior that could be avoided. So it's on us as marketers to get that resolved in advance of the rush of people coming into our storefronts.
Hey, Alex, one more
Yes.
question, just because it made me think as you were talking through this. You know, one of the things that we're even seeing is with this, you know, holiday season is like in years past, people were buying, maybe there was like a shift in what people were buying to like buying experiential things like, oh, I'll buy you a dinner someplace, or, you know, like I'll buy you a trip. It seems like this year, you know, especially with the COVID impact, right? People are kind of reverting back to buying physical goods for each other, right? So there's obviously a lot more e-commerce. Plus, it seems like people are reverting back to just buying physical items. So that sort of really compounds things, I think, in the e-commerce world.
100%. And like it even extends into sort of like the areas that we wouldn't typically associate with like holiday purchasing behavior, right? Like as an example, my wife has a birthday on December 20th. So like for her birthday, I would take her out for dinner or something as a gift. That wouldn't be considered typically as like present spending or like holiday spending in the way that, you know, we're looking at overall purchasing behavior for the holiday. That's just going out. But it is a special time and it is happening during that period of the year. But that can't happen now because restaurants are, you know, really significantly restricted in like who comes to the venues, like the actual safety protocols that are, you know, in place. So like that now needs to be rerouted somewhere else. I can't just not get my wife, you know, something for her birthday, so I have to get her something. So now I need to go like look online and like maybe find something that she's really wanted for a really long time. So there's other things that wouldn't be necessarily picked up as e-commerce transactions, but actually getting routed that way now because of the overall situation we're seeing with COVID-19. And that actually dovetails really nicely with something that I think is really important to understand about the marketplace as well, is that we're still seeing really high unemployment. And I'll get to why that's important in a minute, but you know, even for September, we're seeing like a 7.9% unemployment rate, and I'm certain the underemployment rate is still really significant as well. What that means to us as marketers, that there's on average less purchasing power per capita, essentially. So from a strategy perspective, from a sales perspective, from a presentation perspective, that is going to be something that we should be cognizant of and make it a little bit easier to and accessible to get that prospect to convert, whether that be through discounts and bundles or like overall just like price decreases. We should be cognizant of the situation that we're all in, even if we're not personally affected, that, you know, is affecting the global economy, you know, large scale. And yeah, this is slide 10 is illustrating that this is very much a global issue, not necessarily a thing that is regional or even to one country. So this is impacting folks very significantly.
Hey, so question on that. So how do you think that nets out, right? So like people are buying more on e-commerce, people are buying more physical products, but they also have, you know, lower incomes, less disposable income. So how do you think that translates? Do they buy more smaller dollar value items so they sort of spread what they have around, or do they just buy one bigger gift? Like, how do you think that'll end up playing out, or more just any guess if you have it?
So, you know, based off like the behavior that I've typically seen so far in market, luxury items and high ticket items that are, you know, either aspirational or something that would require saving up for, we'll see a hit because people are starting to look at that, you know, as less necessary than the day-to-days. Meanwhile, things like that are functional, that are useful in a more general sense, are going to see an uptick in, or rather not be necessarily as impacted as much because the valuation of, you know, the impact of folks is actually going to be higher for those more common items than for those luxury or aspirational items. So what that means in terms of strategy and like the way forward is that those sort of luxury brands, and you know, I market quite a few of those, need to have a much more significant response to these behaviors and trends than you would typically see for someone who sells like weather stripping in Michigan.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Yep. Cool. So moving on to how to prepare. So there's a couple different ways to do it, and all of these are good. Some of these are going to be better for a particular business, but none of them are going to be something that's like, oh, this is awful, I shouldn't do this at all. It's really like identifying, communicating, prioritizing these different things that are going to be the most meaningful for your business, because like you chase two rabbits, you catch none. So just pick your rabbit that you want to chase here. So first thing that I always recommend is focusing on acquisition, especially over the next couple like weeks. As I mentioned before, the election is going to have a huge footprint at the early stages of November and like late October. So it should really be prioritized right now to focus on getting and warming up those prospects now. Whether that be through video views and engagement, which are the tactics I typically deploy, or really like a conversion campaign is optimized further up the funnel for like a view content or something on Facebook. What we're trying to do here is get those people in our custom audiences, whether they be site visitors or purchasers or anything else, so that we can remessage them later. And that's sort of like an overall strategic pivot that I recommend to universally, just because it's easier to get a sale on a prospect you've already identified than bringing someone in cold, like nurturing them and informing them all of the the values of your brand and sort of like converting them like that. So even though it's more expensive from like a CPM angle, it's less expensive overall marketplace wise. So that is a little bit counterintuitive, but I recommend shifting to retargeting as soon as you start seeing CPMs increase. With regards to video views and engagement campaigns, these are really effective. And if you have video assets, I really highly recommend them. And running a campaign like this, because a 1% share of voice in the footwear vertical, speaking from experience of managing a client of mine, costs about $1 million if you want to have 1% in that space. If you want to have 1% in the video space in footwear, it costs about $2,000. There's much less competition, there's much less focus there. You're just able to reach those individuals and retarget against completed views or partial views in your conversion campaigns. And it basically adds a lot of liquidity and flexibility to your campaigns and allows you to test out new audiences at the top of the funnel without having to build out a new ad set and put everything into learning phase. I really significantly recommend this. I use it on every campaign that has any video assets because it is so strong a way to not only identify hand raisers, no one's going to watch a 15 or 20-second video unless they're interested in what they're seeing, and then remessage them based on that behavior. So that's worked out really well for me. Performance thresholds on the pivot for strategy. So it's going into Q4. We know that CPMs are going to rise. We know that there's going to be a lot of competition in the space. So we need to understand what is going to be the triggering condition on when we decide to pivot entirely to retargeting. Whether that be a CPM or a cost per sale or a return on ad spend, we need to determine as sort of like a line that once we cross that, that should result in us pivoting our strategies, because otherwise it's very easy to fall into like the mental trap of like, oh, well, it's not that high. Oh, well, it's not that high. I could still continue running these ads. And falling into that trap means you're going to be up until like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, still running acquisition campaigns at like a $45 CPM, which is less efficient than if you had just understood that like, oh, at a $27 CPM, I'm going to pivot everything into, retargeting. And understanding and taking that action earlier is going to save you dollars and drive you more revenue in the long run. Next thing is dynamic ads, shops, and Instagram shopping. These are all really strong like units or platforms or offerings. Dynamic ads allows you to basically tie a catalog into your ad units so that you're able to message one-to-one to your prospects. And I use this all the time for retargeting because, especially when it comes to high-end apparel, personalization is king. People like the feeling of being directly addressed as an individual and having their data utilized in such a way as to say, hey, you looked at product A, here's product A again, are you interested in buying this? That lands significantly better than, hey, you looked at product A, here's a generic retargeting ad. Personalization is paramount, especially as we go into Q4 and the benefits thereof continuously increase in the face of like higher cost CPMs. So I really recommend setting those up and using them in any sort of conversion-based effort for e-com, as well as getting your shop set up on Facebook and Instagram shopping set up as well. I'll speak to this in a little bit on a different slide, so I don't want to belabor it too much here, but those are something that we definitely want to know about. Conversions API, same situation. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but essentially there's an ongoing trend in the digital marketing marketplace where there's been increasing barriers, whether that be from CCPA or GDPR, whether that be from iPhone's ID4 policy update, there's been more and more barriers to browser-based tracking behaviors that we have traditionally used in e-com. So Conversions API is a way around that by using the e-com server itself as a way to track those behaviors. And I'll go through it a little bit later, but top level, it takes 20 minutes to set up and it'll save you a couple $1,000s over the next few months. So I think it's worth it. Those are the Facebook strategies. Oh, actually, I forgot one more thing, sponsored messages. This is a unique type of unit that uses messaging rather than using a typical like in-feed or right rail ad unit. Sponsored messages are outstanding because they are able to sit on top of the inventory on Facebook. It's like a chat head when you're talking to your friends, right? So on a mobile device, a sponsored message is a full screen experience from a brand. On desktop, it sits overlaid on top of the newsfeed and every other placement, has 99, 98% open rate. And this is a branded message that directs users to a sale or a store or anything else. It requires a lot of setup. It requires a lot of like legwork and elbow grease to get not only a chatbot set up and working correctly, but also making sure that you've tuned the settings on those chatbots correctly to foster like a frictionless experience and not drive people up the wall with like spammy cart recovery messages or anything else. I am a partner with Octane AI, which is my preferred e-com vendor for chatbots. And I recently got published in their e-com playbook this year, and I highly recommend that you guys take a look at that if that's something you want to explore. Sponsored messages, I typically see like a 40 or 50x return on, which is, I'm not exaggerating. I'm actually kind of underselling it a little bit when I say 40x because I hit a 48x on my last one that I ran. So good choice if you want to cut through the noise, especially in Black Friday, Cyber Monday. But those are all just Facebook strategies. Off Facebook strategies, chatbots. I spoke a little bit about that with sponsored messages, but there's a lot more in the chatbot universe than just sponsored messages. You can make product quizzes, you can make personalization efforts, you can actually target any sort of action that's conducted in sort of chat environment. If someone's shopping for shoes in a personalized quiz and they select like a size 10, I can retarget everyone who selected a size 10 with specific size 10 messaging on Facebook as a custom audience, which is a level of like really personalizing your communication that is not available in a lot of other places. Email and SEM, natural partners to Facebook. How it sort of sits, like Facebook sits on top of both of those channels in terms of the ability to drive conversions through like an overall marketing funnel, SEM, email being very bottom funnel, of course. But the upper funnel focus of Facebook allows you to feed those prospects into your email, into search, so that the pull strategy of SEM converts more readily and the overall volume of hand raisers in email populates more quickly. So those are two sort of like really low-hanging fruit options to enable further conversions and behaviors there. One other thing that I have seen that works really well for SMBs is influencer content. And the reason that I mentioned that is trust is one of the biggest issues I see going into in converting users for small and medium business. I have a client that is basically mail order fish, and they have supplied businesses and restaurants for years and years and years, and now they're trying to direct to consumer offering. So their business is all buttoned up, they're solvent, they're making money, but they're trying to expand into this new space. And the issue that they're running into is it fresh? Is it trusted? Like, obviously like mail order fish is something that, I'm going to be concerned with as a consumer. So they're running into a really significant wall with trust and making sure that the product that they're going to get is quality, they're going to get it in a timely fashion. And when they get it, they're going to be satisfied with what they perceived on, while they're shopping versus what they actually got. And the way around that is to utilize trusted resources like influencers, reviews, other platforms, and like speaking to basically addressing the risk assessment process and making sure that you're communicating that it is quality, that it is trustworthy, and that you're going to be satisfied when you get the product. I see that all the time, whether it's apparel, food, financial services. So making sure that you're addressing that point of the consideration does a lot of heavy lifting and I really highly recommend it. And then programmatic display allows you to reach audiences that are off Facebook that may, you know, never actually be on the platform. While Facebook does have an audience of 300 million people in the United States, that's not the people who will log in daily. That is just the overall total audience. So if you want to access some of those, you know, prospects that exist off platform, programmatic display is a really easy way to do that.
Yeah, you know, just on that last point, Alex, we end up doing that a lot too, as just a way of reinforcing the brand. So like if you're engaging with us through social on Instagram or Facebook, we also do some display to then just add that extra layer more for branding and just kind of seeing our brand in more places. So kind of creates a feeling like you know, your brand is in more places maybe than you naturally are. So it kind of it adds like a halo effect on top of what you're already doing on social.
And it does also drive prospects to your site, which are retargetable, not only on programmatic, but also on Facebook. So if those users go to a different platform, you can still hit them with different messaging, but the same brand and different values potentially. So it is complementary, and the sum is greater than the parts. So
yeah, definitely. It's definitely much more cost effective than Facebook too.
Yes. Cool. So really, like, going into Black Friday, Cyber Monday, which is sort of like the elephant in the room, there's really two choices, brute force or finesse. Brute force is like, hey, if you can outspend Coke or Procter and Gamble, do it. That's awesome. I'm in full support. But if you cannot leverage a couple $100 million in ad spend for that particular weekend, then it's going to be on us as entrepreneurs, as marketers, to sort of evaluate what we're strong at, what we can fix in the short term, and how we should sort of like position ourselves within the next couple of months in order to maximize you know, the behaviors that we're looking for, whether that be purchases, leads, or anything else. So there's other ways of doing that. I see a lot of advertisers moving earlier in the month to avoid like the really high CPMs of Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And that's like sort of a very easy, accessible way of doing just the like avoiding the competition of the marketplace during that time. So evaluate your strengths, evaluate what you're good at, evaluate like what your resources are, and then with all that in mind, you know, evaluate the context that we exist in, and then move forward with implementation of a strategy that's going to allow you to minimize your exposure risk, maximize the benefits of the season. Then,
I think just on that last point, I think you definitely have to be super creative as a marketer at this time, because like you said, I mean, who's got a budget to, you know, compete with Procter and Gamble or something right now? I mean, you're absolutely right. So it definitely takes more effort and more creativity and more planning right now to stand out, because like you said, between the political climate, e-commerce, et cetera, like there's just so many big spenders willing to spend money, you know, on paid media right now that you know, you're never going to compete.
Mm-hmm. And like, to that point, you know, a lot of people, when we start getting into late October, early November, there's a mental shift in the buying audience, where rather than, oh, I need this thing, I'm going to go buy it, it's, oh, I need this thing, I'm going to wait until it's on sale. So as we go through, you know, November in particular, that's just sort of like evaluated by a lot of folks as like the sale month. It's, I'm not going to buy anything in November unless there's a promotion going on, because it's understood by the consumer that people have been moving earlier in the month. And from that, like, that's influenced overall behavior. So it should be understood, you know, from a business perspective, that overall sales are going to be depressed in the portions of the month where we are not running a promotion or a special, and that doesn't necessarily have to be like an evergreen thing. One of the strategies that I've seen used is like running like a constant, you know, 5 or 10% off sale, but, you know, during particular days in the week, during the month, doing like a 30 or 40% one-day flash sale, and just using that to, you know, keep people engaged, keep people watching the store, and then maximizing the amount of people who are able to jump in and purchase, while also not making it so that you're running a consistent 30 or 40% off, which is going to absolutely hurt your margins really significantly. So that's one strategy, but, you know, a lot of folks are holding off until they see the thing that they on sale. So I spoke a little bit earlier about Conversions API, and in aggregate, there's a lot of changes that are happening in the data landscape and the legal landscape for data that are resulting in more data signals falling off. Data signals, those are your view contents, your add to carts, your initiate checkouts, add payment, all of those things, all those events that we track are getting harder and harder to observe and measure, and that's the backbone of any successful digital marketing campaign. Algorithms that we deploy in e-commerce sense, take a look at all these different signals that they're receiving, and then utilize that information to either interpret and test in new audiences or expand on successes they've already seen. And if we're losing like 30-40% of those signals, that's 30-40% more time it's going to take to get to a state of optimization and efficiency. Learning phase is the single largest driver of inefficient campaigns. And making sure that we're doing everything that we can as advertisers, marketers to get out of that phase should be really close to the top of the list when it comes to any sort of like future marketing efforts. So the Conversions API actually resolves this in as much as we're able to at the current time and day. What it does is it actually integrates those behaviors that pixel on the server backend. Shopify just launched an integration with this. It's very easy to sort of set up if you are the business owner. If you are not the business owner, it is actually kind of difficult. It requires having admin privileges on everything: Facebook page, Instagram page, business manager, ad account, pixel, catalog, everything that is associated with a business manager. Someone needs to have admin level privileges on. And there is a mandatory 7-day waiting period on any new admins assigned to a business manager. So even if you came to an agency and you gave them all the permissions necessary to set up Conversions API, you still have to wait that period before they're able to move forward with it. But the value of the Conversions API is that we are tracking all of those signals, so we're actually getting more efficient faster than if we were not tracking those signals. In addition, now we're actually measuring sales and conversions that may have not been attributable initially from our paid marketing campaigns. It's very common for pixels to fall off or not load properly when loading like a conversion event, like a purchase. iPhones in particular are shuttering the ID4 sort of platform or option rather. So that's going to severely impact these sort of like app download conversion events. And so we just need to make sure that we're always staying like up to date on what the overall media and data landscape looks like, and taking steps to implement like the latest solves and best practices in order to make sure that we're getting meaningful information and feedback from our paid efforts, essentially. In terms of, I mentioned Shopify a little bit earlier, and I really think that Shopify is sort of like, Shopify is a household name at this point. Next 5, 6 years, 10 years, I think that they're going to be one of the biggest names in the e-commerce space, in the small, medium-sized business space, specifically because of the fluidity and flexibility of the platform. And what I mean by that is that, if you run like a WooCommerce e-com platform, you have like the WooCommerce backend, you have a couple apps that plug into it, and it's all good. With the Shopify backend, if I have a Facebook account associated with that, I can integrate a chatbot, I can integrate email service platform, I can integrate a reviews analysis and aggregation platform. I can really plug in a whole number of things along with the Conversions API. And these platforms all share data with each other. So I can actually push data back from a chatbot perspective into an email list. I can export those into Facebook. I can import Yahoo reviews into Facebook ads seamlessly. These things are greater than the sum of their parts. The ability to actually share data across platforms means that there's no sort of barriers or silo inherent to your marketing efforts. And the more fluidity that exists in these different efforts, the greater performance you're going to see. Being able to directly export a review from Yahoo into a Facebook ad. We know that review copy on ads works really well. So using a direct one-to-one integration to pipe in those reviews to ad copy is going to not only be really effective and efficient, because now we have like constantly updating copy and like the A/B testing there, but also now it's hands off. I've set it up, it's doing its thing. I don't need to manually go and add copy and then track new ads. So these automations that are on the Shopify platform make life really easy, and I really can't give enough of
Hey, Alex, quick question. What kind of budgets do you apply to something like this? Like, like what could be a realistic, call it small budget, that some of our merchants could apply to using some of these things? Because I know some of these techniques may be, more advanced than, what some of our merchants are doing today. But what I feel like, you're communicating is like, look, you can't just run a bunch of basic Facebook ads and expect, different results, right? Because the marketplace is too crowded, right? You have to use some of these more advanced techniques. And so like, what should, our partners expect to spend on some of these campaigns and using some of these newer techniques, I guess?
typically what I spend on my e-commerce campaigns. Budget between $5,000 and $10,000 for a client. I obviously have clients that spend a lot more, but that 5K is typically the minimum that we recommend in order to see results in a reasonable time frame. You can of course spend less, but we're talking in terms of data signal aggregation and optimization and like efficiency here. And within the timetable that most people evaluate success on, that sort of 5K over 30 days is really like where we found like the minimum viable option, sort of.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah. Any questions so far from anyone else? All right.
Yeah, all good. Yeah, let's keep going.
Cool. All right. So there's some new Facebook features that I think are really going to be meaningful for small and medium-sized business. That is Facebook Shops and Instagram Shopping and Live Shopping. Facebook Shops enables you to have a checkout and shopping experience on the Facebook platform, utilizing the technical backbone of Facebook to allow for a much easier sort of checkout and conversion process. I can't count the number of times that I've ran into the problem where like a client's site is actually sort of the impediment to getting people to convert. With Facebook Shops, that's no longer an issue. We're utilizing the speed of the Facebook platform, the trust of that platform to allow people to purchase directly from that platform using Facebook checkout and financial information that you set up through your ecom backend. And then Instagram Shopping and Live Shopping allows people to really dig into Instagram as like a visual medium. What this allows advertisers or marketers or business owners to do is to tag products in stories or in feed posts that people are able to actually directly interact with and then check out with on platform. So I post an Instagram shot of a pair of shoes. I tag it, someone's able to see that post and then click on the tag and then purchase within that environment without ever leaving Instagram. This is a really massive benefit to small businesses and people getting like up off the ground because of the fact that it doesn't require any sort of long form like going off platform like drop right from that. And then a lot of people actually are on the Facebook Instagram platform, to evaluate and identify new products. So being in front of those users as they're in that sort of new product identification and evaluation phase is going to be meaningful in terms of selling more products. And then the last things that to set yourself up for success on these platforms is for for Instagram shopping and for Facebook shops, making sure you have a really lenient and clearly communicated shipping policy. Shipping delays are one of the biggest reasons that people give negative feedback to Facebook accounts, to ad accounts, and as previously mentioned, those are really significant. Those impact your ability to bid on future ads really significantly. And if there's enough negative feedback, your actual account will be shut down. So making sure that people are getting them in a timely fashion, that you're being clear and communicative about that is really critical. And then, as sort of like a launch process, incentive to get up and running here, Facebook's actually waiving all checkout fees until the end of the year. Normally there's like, I think a 5% checkout fee that gets associated with this sort of execution, but that's not the case until December 31st. So that's free money by setting this up, by creating a really accessible, frictionless shopping experience that you're not getting charged for, essentially. So the sooner they can get up and running and optimized and built out completely, the sooner you're able to capitalize on those platforms to sell in greater volumes more efficiently.
Hey, Alex, quick question that was, I'm just going through the chat. One of the questions was about the conversion API. Where does someone actually go to find that? Where do they, if they want to implement that, where is that located for them, or where do you point them to?
Yeah, so I can only speak to the Shopify backend at this time because that's where my experience has been, getting this up and running. It's a very, very new product. It was only announced last week for full-scale development implementation. So on Shopify, there's a left side rail that has a number of apps associated with it. One of those apps is Facebook. You go in there and you go through the process of stuff. It's very, guided. You have to associate the profile that you want to use, the ad account, the business manager, the page, the Instagram handle, and a couple other things, and determine how you want to actually set up the checkout process, and then click save. The only thing that's going to be the necessary step to set up the conversions API in particular is there's going to be an option for tracking within the data sharing settings that is part of the standard setup process. So you have to go through it anyway. Setting that to maximum is going to allow you to use the most data signals, and that is enabling the conversions API. And to check that it's working, once you've implemented it, if you go into Facebook Events Manager and see your pixel, you should start seeing browser-based events on purchase events within a couple days. And when you're seeing those server-based events, that's the conversions API.
Great, thanks. Super great information. I actually learned about that myself, so I definitely appreciate that. I mean, it's just there's so much complexity to what you have to do here, to get traffic, get it to your website, personalize the experience, get the conversions. I mean, there's a lot to that. I mean, that's not something simple that you're just going to learn overnight. I mean, that's obviously either, you need to use an agency like yours or hire the right expertise to help you with that. I mean, I think, part of my key takeaway from this again is the market's getting super saturated and complicated to try to find consumers, right? Especially right now with, you have Amazon Prime Day, Walmart, has their promotions this week. Target jumped in the mix. Like you said, 11/11's coming, all of Black Friday's being accelerated for it. I mean, you have the political scene blasting ads out. I mean, it's just so hard to find an audience that I think what you're sharing is there's a lot of complexity in here. This is not easy stuff. It isn't hey, I just create a banner ad and buy some media and away you go, right? It's you have to dig in, get into the weeds, and you either have to hire a firm to help you like yours, or you have to hire the right skill sets in-house. What I often tell a lot of folks is you not only have to be a great designer and product person, but you also have to be a great digital marketer and really understand the data side of how you drive an audience all the way through to conversion. So a lot of great stuff here. I know there was Baron threw a couple questions out here that I think he wanted you to cover, but his question was, how would you position first-time advertisers and small businesses with messaging, how many ad sets, what kind of creative, etc., and then how much time, money, should they invest in some of these things? Can you kind of maybe cover off on some of that?
Sure thing. And that's been one of the focuses that I've had with my strategic relationship with Facebook, is sort of understanding how best to utilize structure and implementation on the Facebook side of things in order to drive the most results as fast as possible. So a first-time advertiser, I do recommend that sort of 5K threshold. That's meaningful from an agency relationship standpoint, because if we go longer than a month without seeing results, it's very difficult to have to keep on sort of kicking the can there. Obviously, if you're doing it in-house, you're able to customize that to fit your needs. But as you're approaching an agency, that 5K is the minimum that I would recommend just for everyone's sanity. In terms of building the actual campaigns out, it used to be sort of the standard practice to get really granular, have one ad set focused on this one audience with this one ad, another ad set focused on this other audience with this other ad, even though there's like not much difference between the two. That has completely changed. The preferred way and the way that I see the most performance coming out of campaigns these days, and what I continuously work towards, is consolidation. So if you're a brand new advertiser that has decided to spend 5K for the first 30 days, I would recommend one ad set, 6 ads, one campaign. And the reason for that is view spend, like daily spend, is like a resource, right? The resource is used to acquire data signals, and that's from impressions, from view contents, add to carts, purchases, everything else. The more that we can route data through a single point is going to lead to faster optimization. And sort of critical to understanding this is that all the optimizations, all the learnings, all the data that is stored on Facebook is bucketed by the campaign level. It's bucketed by the ad set level. So like if I duplicate a campaign that has like $30,000 of media that's associated with it, that duplicated campaign has no data associated with it, even though I duplicated it from a campaign that had a lot of data. So making sure that we're routing our budget in as few places as possible to make sure we get through the learning phase as fast as possible is the recommendation there. Again, learning phase is the leading cause of campaign inefficiency. So getting out of it as soon as possible is the smartest move.
Yeah, as you were talking, I just, can't echo that enough, but that whole notion of test and optimize, all the different advertising I've done over the years, often the ad or the creative or the CTA that works best is the one that you think that either you personally hate the most or like think the least of, and turns out it's the one that like every consumer loves. So I think part of it is that, like I love that idea of having enough different ads and creative to test and learn and put stuff out there that you may or may not think is going to work, and then lo and behold, it works, and be happily surprised. Don't go in with sort of the mindset of like, no, I know everything. I know what the ad's going to be, and be hard and fast. But let the data drive you to what's ultimately going to convert, right?
I have a vignette that I like to tell about machine learning.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine in the digital marketing space. He was contracted by a warehouse firm to get leads for day laboring position. Basically, they needed to staff up this warehouse. They wanted to get men 18 to 34 who didn't have like a college education, who were just looking for like day labor, that sort of demographic. Mm-hmm. We kept the targeting open. They put all the parameters into the machine. They clicked go, and then they came back about 2 weeks later to find that all of the creative had been translated into Arabic along with the landing page. And obviously everyone's like, what is going on? And the machine identified that the people that like were going to be the lowest cost to convert, who fell into those parameters that we had outlined, was actually a sub-community of recent immigrants from the Middle East. So wow. They actually automatically translated all the copy of those ads, translated the landing page, and completely got the performance they were looking for. The leads were high quality. They ended up staffing all the roles. But that just goes to show you, like, even if you're really confident in who you think your prospects are, who you think your audience is.
Yeah, you never know. You never know.
I've lost count of the times where, I've had the conversation with a client where like, oh, I thought my audience. Yeah. Turns out it's a whole bunch of other people's. Like, that's why I gotta add flexibility in.
Yeah. Hey, Alex, one last question before we wrap up here. So I think one of the questions was like kind of bearing through it out there, and it had kind of another question related to like using Pinterest and so on. So like, where do you see the best value across the different social platforms, and like any kind of specific commentary around Pinterest, and then we'll wrap up from there.
Pinterest is really interesting, and they actually used to be a client of mine before they started pivoting into a full like paid platform. It's very similar to Instagram in the way that it's a visual medium. People go there to shop. People go there to evaluate new products and to buy things. It is still heavily weighted towards the female audience. I think that's composed like 75-80% of all users, and it actually skews a little bit older than you would think. That being said, like it's still a really powerful platform. I do think that it is a great option for those brands and demographics that fall into that category, especially those that use a visual sort of basis for evaluation of the shopping process. Obviously, it's not as feature rich as Facebook. Facebook's had a very long lead on a lot of these companies with regards to data and automation and everything else. So it's going to be a little bit more straightforward and a little bit less, you need to know everything about value-based lookalike audiences. But it is a really strong option for those brands that, it would work for.
Great, thanks. Well, let me just kind of throw up the final slide here, and we'll, I know we're kind of right at the hour, but I did want to say, my screen gets all wonky with all the screens moving around here. Alex, I want to thank you so much for spending the time. I know, you communicated a ton of information, and I mean, look, mastering Facebook advertising is an art form and a journey into itself, and then combining all these other elements to digital advertising, it's not easy, right? You need help, whether it's using like an agency like yours that we partner with, or using external resources, or hiring a performance marketer in-house. I mean, this is not easy, and as you look to grow and sort of enhance your brand and grow your business, right, you're ultimately going to have to figure out this model of how do you digitally acquire new audiences. It's inevitable if you're going to build your business. So yeah. Alex, any final comments? Otherwise, I'm going to say thank you one more time and we'll wrap up.
It's a very competitive, very technical landscape. If there's any sort of thing that I can communicate as sort of like an end cap here, is that it's difficult to reach a lot of people efficiently and automatically, and to optimize those systems and make sure you're doing it right. It's taken me 10 years to get a pretty good handle on it. So like expecting people to just be able to hop in on the platform, pull a lever, and get money out of it is, if that worked, everyone
would be doing it.
That being said, that'd be a great world to live in. But with everybody trying to be on the platforms and all trying to do the same thing, it's now like technical capabilities arms race, essentially. Everyone's trying to get around each other and trying to get that the blood from the stone, so to speak. So it requires a little bit of help, and I hope that for a couple folks on here this is worthwhile today. But happy to join on.
Awesome. Alex, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Say hi to the guys at Hawk for me. Really appreciate you guys being our partner and helping us out here today. And for everyone on the webinar, down here at the bottom is our link to our webinar series. Next week, we have Privy, one of our other partners who does email marketing campaigns. We'll talk about using email as part of your holiday marketing strategies. And so we'll do that next Wednesday, same time, same channel, so to speak. And again, Alex, thank you so much. Zlata as well, thank you for helping me manage all of this process. And thank you all to our partners who joined in. Zlata will be posting a link to the videos and stuff, and make sure all the links are working after the session today. So guys, thanks everyone, really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week. Thanks, bye.
Later.